Random House Audio presents The Joy of Living, Unlocking the Secret and Science of Happiness by Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche with Eric Swanson. Read for you by Jason Scott Campbell with an introduction by Eric Swanson.
This is Eric Swanson, co-author of The Joy of Living. This book began life as a relatively simple assignment of splicing together transcripts of Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche's early public lectures at Buddhist centers around the world and editing the whole into a somewhat logically structured manuscript. It should be noted that Rinpoche, which may be roughly translated from the Tibetan as Precious One, is a title appended to the name of a great master, similar to the way the title PhD is appended to the name of a person deemed expert in various branches of Western study. According to Tibetan tradition, a master granted the title of Rinpoche is often addressed or referred to by the title alone. As is often the case, however, simple tasks tend to assume lives of their own, growing beyond their initial scope into much larger projects. Since most of the transcripts I'd received have been drawn from Yongey Mingyur's early years of teachings, they didn't reflect the detailed understanding of modern science he'd acquired through his later discussions with European and North American scientists, his participation in the Mind and Life Institute conferences, and his personal experience as a research subject at the Waisman Laboratory for Brain Imaging and Behavior at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Fortunately, an opportunity to work directly with Yongey Mingyur on the manuscript opened up when he took a break from his worldwide teaching schedule for an extended stay in Nepal during the closing months of 2004. I must admit that I was inspired more by dread than by excitement over the prospect of spending several months in a country beset by conflict between government and insurgent factions. But whatever inconveniences I experienced during my stay there were more than offset by the extraordinary chance to spend an hour or two every day in the company of one of the most charismatic, intelligent, and knowledgeable teachers I have ever had the privilege of knowing. Born in 1975 in Newbury, Nepal, Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche is a rising star among the new generation of Tibetan Buddhist masters trained outside of Tibet. Deeply versed in the practical and philosophical disciplines of an ancient tradition, he is also amazingly conversant in the issues and details of modern culture, having taught for nearly a decade around the world, meeting and speaking with a diverse array of individuals ranging from internationally renowned scientists to suburbanites trying to resolve petty feuds with angry neighbors. I suspect that the ease with which Rinpoche is able to navigate the complex and sometimes emotionally charged situations he encounters during his worldwide teaching tours stems in part from having been groomed from an early age for the rigors of public life. At the age of 3, he was formally recognized by the 16th Karmapa, one of the most highly esteemed Tibetan Buddhist masters of the 20th century, as the 7th incarnation of Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche, a meditation adept and scholar of the 17th century who was noted in particular as a master of advanced methods of Buddhist practice. At about the same time, Dilgo Chense Rinpoche informed Rinpoche's parents that their son was also the incarnation of Chapche Kangyur Rinpoche, a meditation master of immense practical genius, who, as one of the first of the great Tibetan masters to voluntarily accept exile from his homeland in the wake of the political changes that began to shake Tibet in the 1950s, commanded until his death an enormous audience of both Eastern and Western students. For those unfamiliar with the particulars of the Tibetan system of reincarnation, a note of explanation may be necessary here. According to the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, great teachers who have achieved the highest states of enlightenment are said to be moved by enormous compassion to be reborn again and again in order to help all living creatures discover in themselves complete freedom from pain and suffering. The Tibetan term for these passionately committed men and women is tulku, a word that may be roughly translated into English as physical emanation. Undoubtedly the best-known tulku of the modern age is the Dalai Lama, whose current incarnation epitomizes the compassionate commitment to the welfare of others ascribed to a reincarnate master. Whether you choose to believe that the present Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche has carried the same broad range of practical and intellectual skills through successive incarnations, or has mastered them through a truly exceptional degree of personal diligence, is up to you. What distinguishes the current Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche from previous holders of the title is the worldwide scale of his influence and renown. While previous incarnations of the Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche line of tulkus has been somewhat limited by the geographical and cultural isolation of Tibet, circumstances have conspired to allow the current holder of the title to communicate the depth and breadth of his mastery to an audience of thousands, extending from Malaysia to Manhattan to Monterey. Titles and pedigrees, however, offer little in the way of protection against personal difficulties, of which Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche certainly has had his share. As he relates with great candor, though raised by a loving family in an area of Nepal noted for its pristine beauty, he spent his early years plagued by what would probably be diagnosed by Western specialists as panic disorder. When he first told me about the depth of anxiety that characterized his childhood, I found it hard to believe that this warm, charming, and charismatic young man had spent much of his childhood in a persistent state of fear. It's a testament not only to his extraordinary strength of character, but also to the efficacy of the Tibetan Buddhist practices he presents in this, his first book, that he was able, without recourse to conventional pharmaceutical and therapeutic aid, to master and overcome this affliction. Rinpoche's personal testimony is not the only evidence of his triumph over devastating emotional pain. In 2002, as one of 8 long-term Buddhist meditation practitioners participating in a study conducted by Antoine Lutz, Ph.D., a neuroscientist trained by Francisco Varela, and Richard Davidson, Ph.D., a world-renowned neuroscientist and a member of the Board of Scientific Counselors of the National Institute of Mental Health, Yongey Mingyur underwent a battery of neurological tests at the Waisman Laboratory in Madison, Wisconsin. The tests employed state-of-the-art fMRI technology that, unlike standard MRI technology, which provides only a kind of still photograph of brain-body activity, captures a moment-by-moment pictorial record of changing levels of activity in different areas of the brain. The EEG equipment used to measure the tiny electrical impulses that occur when brain cells communicate was also quite sophisticated. Whereas a typical EEG procedure involves attaching only 16 electrodes to the scalp in order to measure electrical activity at the surface of the skull, the equipment used in the Waisman lab employed 128 electrodes in order to measure tiny changes in electrical activity deep within the subject's brains. The results of both the fMRI and EEG studies of these 8 trained meditators were impressive on 2 levels. While practicing compassion and loving-kindness meditation, the brain area known to be activated in maternal love and empathy was more prominently activated among long-term Buddhist practitioners than among a group of control subjects who had been given meditation instructions 1 week prior to the scans and asked to practice daily. Yongey Mingyur's capacity to generate such an altruistic and positive state was truly amazing, since even people who don't suffer panic attacks frequently experience feelings of claustrophobia when lying in the narrow space of an fMRI scanner. The fact that he could focus his mind so capably, even in a claustrophobic environment, suggests that his meditation training overrode his propensity for panic attacks. More remarkably, the measurements of the long-term practitioner's EEG activity during meditation were apparently so far off the scale of normal EEG readings that, as I understand it, the lab technicians thought at first that the machinery might have been malfunctioning. After hastily double-checking their equipment, though, the technicians were forced to eliminate the possibility of mechanical malfunction and confront the reality that the electrical activity associated.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?